My goal with this talk is really simple. It's to help each and every single one of you to thrive in the future of work, to help you emerge from the chaos of the pandemic and understand how to navigate the coming years. Now, whether you work in events, in learning, human resources, or any other industry, whether you're a newly minted leader, a seasoned executive, or a leader keen on shifting your perspective, no matter if you lead people, projects, or simply lead yourself, strap in because this is for you. All right, let's get the show on the road. At some point in your life, you must have heard about the Fortune 500 list. And for those of you who didn't, it's an annual exercise in vanity, much like the Forbes list. The Fortune 500 list is a list of the largest corporations by total revenue for their respective fiscal years. Take a second to think about which companies are in the global top 10 this year. What are the 10 largest companies in the world by total revenue in the year 2021? And go ahead and let me know in the chat. What's up, Daryl? What are the top 10 largest companies in the world by total revenue in the year 2021? Good guess. Amazon, Apple. All right. FedEx, Apple, very interesting. Google, Nike, Pfizer. Good guess, Judy. Microsoft, Christine, Tesla. All right. Let's take a look. Give yourself a pat on the back if you got at least one of these right. After all, this list isn't exactly top of mind for most people, but hey, if you ever get asked about this on Jeopardy, you're welcome. Check it out. These are the top 10 Fortune 500 companies this year. Walmart, State Grid, Amazon, China National Petroleum, Cinepec Group, Apple, CVS Health, United Health Group, Toyota Motor, and Volkswagen. Now let's rewind the clock back to the year 1995, which is the year Kevin Costner's Waterworld came out, a movie that's basically Mad Max on the high seas. Who do you think were the top 10 Fortune 500 companies back in 1995? Any guesses? Carolyn, Shanton, Ken, you want to take a guess? Who were the top 10 Fortune 500 companies back in 1995? IBM, Exxon, very good. GE, Microsoft, all right. Xerox, good, good. Here you go, team. Mitsubishi, Mitsui & Co., Itochu, Sumitomo, GM, Morbeni, Ford, Exxon, Nisho Iwai, and Royal Dutch Shell Group. Between the 2021 list and the 1995 list, there's not a lot of overlap. In fact, none at all. Even Royal Dutch Shell Group was at that point two different companies. Now let's rewind even further back, shall we, all the way to the year 1955. Who were the top 10 back then? Take a look. GM, Exxon, US Steel, General Electric, Esmark, Chrysler, Armor, Gulf Oil, Mobil, and DuPont. Are y'all seeing a pattern here? None of these lists look the same. Now take a wild guess. How many of the original Fortune 500 companies are still on the list today, let alone even in existence in 2021? Any guesses? Angie, Judy, Shanton, want to take a guess? How many of the original Fortune 500 companies are still on the list today? Ooh, I see 3, 1, 0. Jeffrey says 68. Angie, 1. Daryl, none. Well, take a look. Y'all were in the right orbit. Only 12, which means that in 66 years, 88% of Fortune 500 companies went bankrupt or got acquired. And in one way or another, they dissolved and disappeared. Now, that very first list came out in 1917. How many companies from way back then do you reckon are still on the list right now? The answer is just one. And I'm going to tell you who, but more importantly, why by the end of this talk. My friends, the bleak truth is this. Most organizations fail, and believe me, as a leader myself and as a business owner, no less, I get zero joy in sharing that with you, and I trust that you get zero joy in hearing that. In fact, you're probably thinking to yourself, but Hamza, my organization isn't like most organizations, and to that I'd say fair, but I'd also encourage you to consider that perhaps you're experiencing what's known as optimism bias. Well said, Bonnie. Whatever rises eventually falls, and let's get into that in a second. And optimism bias is nothing to be embarrassed about by any means. We all experience this. It's a cognitive bias that causes someone to believe that they themselves are less likely to experience a negative event. Think of it as our 10,000-year-old defense mechanism against adversity. It's the self-persuasion and at times the self-delusion that bad things only happen to other people, like the fact that most companies fail. You and I can rationalize that other companies fail, but surely not our companies, right? Right? Don't just take my word for it. McKinsey found in a survey of 3,000 executives that the average enterprise transformation failure rate is a whopping 60%. That means anytime an organization attempts to undergo substantial change, it fails 60% of the time. And check this out, Harvard Business Review puts that number up even higher at 70%. All of this is to say, organizations tend to drop the ball when it comes to change. And in the words of legendary basketball coach John Wooden, failure isn't fatal, but failure to change might be. So what the hell is going on? Why do organizations fail to navigate change and then tumble into the chasm of time? As Bonnie said, whatever rises eventually falls, and that is the truth. Well, why don't we hear from Fortune themselves? In 2002, they published a report and identified a whole host of reasons. These, my friends, are the top 4. At number 4, we have rotten corporate culture. Companies are brought down by the rogue actions of a tiny toxic few. And in these situations, what you typically have are narcissistic, Machiavellian, and psychopathic leaders who create self-serving cultures of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And we're going to talk about this in just a few minutes. At number 3 is negligence. Organizations grow for the sake of growing, and they warp their business model to accommodate predictions based on growth, but they fail to model what would happen if that key assumption disappears from the equation. At number 2 is complacency. Leaders are less likely to make optimal decisions after prolonged periods of success. They essentially get drunk on success. And I'm going to give you a short story in just a few minutes that will really drive this idea home. And here we are, my friends, the number 1 reason why organizations fail: avoidance. They're slow to confront the changing world around them. And wow, is our world changing. Back when I was in the Canadian Armed Forces, we were taught the following acronym, VUCA. And I'm going to refer to it as VUCA in this presentation. And I think you'll agree with me on how effectively this describes our current state of affairs. The more volatile the environment, the faster and further conditions change. The more uncertain the environment, the harder it is to forecast. The more complex the environment, the harder it is to analyze. And the more ambiguous the environment, the harder things are to decipher. Another way to conceptualize VUCA is as entropy. Entropy explains how, if left unchecked, disorder tends to increase over time. And so if a leader is engaged in avoidance, they can be assured that their circumstances aren't going to get any better. It is a law of the universe that they're only going to get worse. Chaos, my friends, is hungry for failing organizations, and it thrives when leaders are unprepared.